They thought they could bully a combat veteran into quitting. They never expected him to fight back and win. Marcus Washington adjusted his uniform in the reflection of the staff lounge window. The morning light cut through the glass, casting sharp lines across the empty room. It was his first day as the head of custodial services at Westridge Corporate Plaza, a place known for its prestige, extravagant clients, and, as he would quickly learn, its unwritten rules. With a deep breath, he grabbed his maintenance cart and made his way to the executive floor. The moment he pushed the door open to the main suite, the noise inside dropped just enough to be noticeable. 30 pairs of eyes turned toward him, some curious, others indifferent, a few assessing. He wheeled his cart to the corner and began organizing his supplies. "Good morning," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I'm Marcus Washington, your new head of building maintenance." A few executives exchanged looks. In the corner office, a tall, blonde-haired man stretched back in his chair, arms crossed over his chest. Carter Reynolds. The name was already familiar. Son of the building's owner, senior vice president of operations, a man who thought he ran the place. "Washington, huh?" Carter smirked. Thought they'd hire someone younger for all that heavy lifting. A few chuckles rippled through the nearby offices. Marcus met his gaze. "I'd say you'll get used to it, but this job isn't about me. It's about maintaining standards." He began his routine. The laughter faded. The office settled into silence, at least for the moment. The first half of the morning went smoothly. He cleaned the common areas, checked the HVAC systems, and handled a small plumbing issue. But then came the small disruptions. A deliberately knocked-over trash can here, a spilled coffee there. Marcus glanced toward the corner office. Carter and his group, expensive shoes propped up on desks, exchanging hushed remarks, barely pretending to work. He ignored them for now. "All right," Marcus said, finishing up the maintenance log. "Anyone need anything else before I move to the next floor?" Silence. A few executives shifted in their seats. Then from the corner office, a voice. "Depends. Are we talking about actual maintenance, or just what looks good on paper?" More chuckles. Carter again. Marcus leaned against his cart. "That's an interesting distinction. Are you suggesting the building is just for show rather than function?" Carter's smirk faltered, but only for a second. He shrugged. "Just saying some people get jobs before they earn them." The room tensed. The meaning was clear. Marcus's jaw tightened, but he kept his expression neutral. "Merit," Marcus said. "That's an interesting concept. 20 years of military service maintaining bases in combat zones might count for something. But maybe that's a conversation for another time." Carter's smirk returned, but there was something in Marcus's tone that made him sit up just a little straighter. By the time his shift ended, executives shuffled out, some giving Marcus polite nods, others avoiding eye contact. As he packed his supplies, a voice spoke from the doorway. "Mr. Washington?" He turned. A young woman stood there, clutching a tablet to her chest. "Sophia Chin." "Yes. I just wanted to say I thought the way you handled that was impressive. Not many people stand their ground with Carter." He smiled. "Thanks, Sophia. See you tomorrow." She nodded and left. Marcus exhaled, rolling his shoulders. It wasn't the first time he'd been tested, and it wouldn't be the last. But something told him this was only the beginning. By the second week, the tension had thickened. It wasn't outright hostility, at least not yet, but the undercurrent of disrespect was impossible to ignore. It started subtly. Carter Reynolds and his circle, 3 or 4 executives who followed his lead, made sure their defiance was just quiet enough to avoid direct consequences. The first real incident came on Tuesday morning. Marcus walked into the executive floor, cart in one hand, coffee in the other. Half the executives were already at their desks, some reviewing reports, others scrolling on their phones. He approached the maintenance closet, set his things down, and clicked open the door. His fingers froze on the handle. The closet had been tampered with. Instead of his neatly organized supplies, the shelves were in chaos. Cleaning products dumped out, mops tangled together and taped to the back wall, a photoshopped image of him. his face superimposed onto the body of a cartoon janitor mopping up after circus animals. Laughter erupted from the corner office. Marcus's jaw clenched. His eyes flicked to Carter, whose smirk deepened as he leaned back in his chair, arms folded. "Janitor, is that where you keep your sense of humor?" he asked, feigning curiosity. "Didn't realize we were working with a comedian." More laughter. For a split second, Marcus considered calling building security to review the cameras, but he knew how this worked. If he made a scene, they'd turn it into a joke, make him seem overdramatic. Weak. Instead, he took a deep breath, began reorganizing the closet, and turned back to the room. "Interesting choice of artwork," he said. "I hope whoever made this put half as much effort into their actual job responsibilities." The room fell silent. He continued organizing his supplies as if nothing had happened. "Now let's get to work." Carter's smirk wavered. He hadn't expected Marcus to brush it off so easily. But that was only the beginning. By the end of the week, the pranks had escalated. The maintenance office door was covered in crude drawings. Not outright offensive, but just enough to mock him. Anonymous emails circulated through the company questioning his qualifications and suggesting he received preferential hiring as a diversity hire. And then there was the incident in the executive bathroom. It was Friday afternoon. Marcus was halfway through cleaning the executive restroom when it happened. Carter stretched and let out an exaggerated yawn as he entered. "Sorry, Washington," he said loudly. "Just trying not to fall asleep from boredom. Must be how you feel every day cleaning up after your betters." Marcus ignored it. But then another executive did the same. Then another. Within seconds, half of Carter's group was there, mocking him, making exaggerated, disgusted faces like his presence was unbearable. Marcus set down his supplies. Silence filled the room. He walked slowly around the bathroom, eyes scanning each face before stopping in front of Carter. "You have a problem with cleanliness, Mr. Reynolds?" His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. Carter shrugged. "Just saying some places know how to hire appropriate staff." Marcus nodded. "That's fair. But let's test something." He turned to the rest of the executives. "Anyone here who wants to clean their own toilets from now on, go ahead and speak up. No judgment." The room stilled. A few executives exchanged glances. One shifted his weight as if contemplating it, but no one spoke. Marcus looked back at Carter. "Looks like appreciation for maintenance isn't the issue, is it?" Carter's smirk slipped. Marcus turned and walked back to his supplies. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to complete." The games were over, but the real fight hadn't even begun. By the third week, the situation had gone from petty games to outright sabotage. Marcus arrived at his maintenance office early Monday morning, ready to prepare for the day's tasks. As he reached for the doorknob, his hand stopped midair. The door was covered in red marker. Big, messy letters scrolled across the wood. "Fraud. Unqualified. Go back where you belong." Marcus's stomach tightened. He scanned the hallway empty. Whoever had done this had made sure to do it when no one was around. His hands curled into fists, but he forced himself to exhale slowly. He wasn't going to give them what they wanted, a reaction. Instead, he pulled out his phone and snapped a photo. 10 minutes later, building security arrived. The officer, a stocky man with thinning hair, scratched his chin as he looked over the vandalism. "Probably just some kids messing around," he said. "You want us to file a report?" Marcus studied the officer's face, indifferent, detached. "Yes," he said. "And I want a copy of it for my records." The officer shrugged. "Sure thing, boss." As he walked away, Marcus leaned against his desk, staring at the door. They wanted him out, that much was clear. But he wasn't going anywhere. That afternoon, he stood in the executive floor supply closet, ready for whatever they had planned next. The moment he began his routine, the building intercom near his station glitched. A loud, distorted voice blared through the speakers. "Imposter! Imposter! Imposter!" Laughter erupted from the corner office. Carter sat there, arms crossed, shaking his head like he couldn't believe what he was witnessing. Marcus's jaw tightened. He unplugged the intercom, his face unreadable. "Whoever spent their weekend hacking the building systems, I hope they put the same effort into their actual job responsibilities." The laughter faded. Carter sat up straighter, his smirk not as strong as it had been before. He had expected anger, maybe even humiliation, but Marcus was still standing, and that was starting to frustrate him. If you're enjoying this story of resilience against workplace bullying, make sure to hit that subscribe button. We're just getting to the best part, where our veteran janitor starts to turn the tables on his tormentors. The final blow came Wednesday morning. Marcus was midway through his maintenance rounds when his phone buzzed, a new email, subject, urgent complaint. His stomach dropped. He clicked it open and read, "Dear Mr. Harrington, it has come to my attention that Marcus Washington has been engaging in unprofessional behavior, showing clear bias towards certain executives and failing to maintain a safe and clean environment. Several employees have expressed concerns about his ability to conduct himself appropriately as head of maintenance. We urge the administration to investigate these claims." The message was unsigned, but Marcus wasn't fooled. He knew exactly who was behind it. Less than an hour later, he sat across from Richard Harrington, the building manager. He tapped a pen against his desk as he skimmed the complaint. "These are serious accusations," he said finally. Marcus folded his hands. "And they're completely false, Mr. Harrington." Harrington sighed, setting the paper down. "I believe you, Marcus. But things like this, they don't just disappear." Marcus's pulse pounded in his ears. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying you need to be smart about this." He leaned forward. "If someone wants you gone, they're not going to stop here. Be ready." Marcus sat back, staring at the ceiling for a long moment. He had two choices, back down or fight back. He chose the second. But he had no idea just how far things were about to go. By Friday, Marcus thought he had prepared for anything, the vandalism, the emails, the office pranks. He had handled it all. But nothing could have prepared him for what happened next. That afternoon, he walked across the corporate plaza, lost in thought, his mind racing through ways to get ahead of the situation. That's when he noticed the snickering two executives passed him near the lobby, one nudging the other with a barely concealed grin. Another group near the elevators glanced at him, whispering behind their hands. Something was wrong. His phone vibrated in his pocket, a text from Sophia Chin. "Mr. Washington, have you seen this?" His chest tightened. He clicked the link she sent, a YouTube video. The title made his stomach drop. "Westridge Plaza Janitor Can't Handle His Job." His thumb hovered over the play button. He inhaled sharply, then pressed it. The video started with low-quality phone footage taken from the executive floor. It showed the intercom hack incident where the distorted voice had blared "imposter" through the room. The camera zoomed in on his face, catching the exact moment his expression shifted. Then an edit, a slow-motion effect, made his reaction look exaggerated, like he was breaking under pressure. Over it, text in bold red letters, "Weak. Pathetic." The next clip was from earlier in the month, his first encounter with Carter. But the audio had been altered. In the clip, it sounded like Marcus had stumbled over his words, hesitated too long before answering. The caption, "Doesn't even know what he's talking about." The final section showed the bathroom incident, executives mocking him. Except the edit made it seem like the entire floor had turned against him. At the bottom of the screen, a poll, "Should he be fired?" The votes weren't in his favor. Marcus's jaw clenched, his hands shook, not with fear, but with something heavier. Rage. This wasn't just disrespect anymore. This was an attack, a calculated attempt to ruin him. He walked straight to his maintenance office and locked the door. He needed to think. This wasn't a fight he could win in private. Carter and his group had made this public, so that's exactly where he needed to take it. For the first time in days, a small smile pulled at the corner of his lips. If they wanted to play dirty, he'd show them what a real counterattack looked like. That night, he made a video of his own. Not an angry rant. Not a defensive speech. No begging. No pleading. Instead, he laid out the facts. First, he showed the original, unedited clips, the real footage, no manipulations, no slow motion, no distorted audio. The bathroom incident, just a few executives, not the whole floor. The intercom hack, a targeted prank. Then he showed screenshots, the vandalized office door, the fake emails, the complaint filed against him. He didn't speculate. He didn't call names. He just let the evidence speak for itself. Finally, he added one last message. "This is what happens when you challenge the system. Some people will do anything to keep you out. But respect isn't given, it's earned. Let's talk about that." Then, with one click, he uploaded it. And by morning, everything had changed. Marcus barely slept that night. He knew his video had to make an impact, but whether people would actually care, that was another story. By morning, his phone wouldn't stop buzzing. He reached for it with a tight chest and tapped the screen. His video, posted barely 10 hours ago, had already hit 350,000 views. His inbox was flooded. Some messages were supportive employees from different buildings sharing their own stories of bias and harassment. Others were nasty, accusing him of playing the victim, of being too weak to handle a little workplace banter. But one email stood out. Subject: urgent, corporate response required. It was from Richard Harrington. Marcus, please come to my office immediately. We have a situation. By the time Marcus walked across the corporate plaza, the energy in the air had shifted. He wasn't imagining it, people were looking at him differently. Some executives avoided eye contact, their faces flushed with embarrassment. Others nodded, gave him a tight-lipped smile like they weren't sure whether to apologize or congratulate him. And then there were the ones who wouldn't look away. Carter Reynolds stood near the entrance to the admin building, arms crossed. His usual smirk was gone. He wasn't laughing anymore. Marcus didn't stop. He pushed open Mr. Harrington's office door without knocking. The building manager sat at his desk, phone in hand, stress written across his face. "Shut the door," he said. Marcus did. Harrington exhaled. "Your video is everywhere." "I know." He pinched the bridge of his nose. "The corporate board wants this handled quietly, but Marcus, this isn't just an internal issue anymore. Journalists are calling." Marcus blinked. "Journalists?" "Yes. Your story hit Twitter last night. There's already a hashtag." He turned his monitor around. Marcus stared at the screen, #StandWithWashington. It wasn't just employees talking anymore. It was clients, former staff, even executives from other buildings. "They're calling for an investigation," Harrington continued. "Not just into your situation, but into the culture at Westridge Plaza." Marcus's heart pounded. He hadn't expected this. He just wanted to protect himself, to clear his name. But now it was bigger than him. Harrington leaned forward. "The administration has no choice but to act. There will be a meeting, official disciplinary hearings." Marcus folded his arms. "For who?" Her lips pressed together. "For the executives involved." By lunchtime, Westridge Corporate had released a statement. It was carefully worded, a lot of corporate talk about reviewing concerns and upholding workplace integrity. But the important part was tucked in the middle. A formal inquiry will be launched into reports of misconduct within the executive team. For the first time since this all started, Marcus felt the ground shift beneath his feet, but in his favor. But he knew this wasn't over, because Carter Reynolds wasn't the type to go down without a fight. The corporate announcement sent shockwaves across the plaza. Employees whispered in hallways, emails flooded management inboxes, and social media erupted. But no one was louder than Carter Reynolds. By mid-afternoon, Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from Sophia Chin. "They're waiting for you outside the main lobby. Be careful." Marcus didn't need to ask who they were. When he stepped into the atrium, a crowd had already formed, employees, some holding their phones up, others murmuring among themselves. And in the middle of it, standing tall with his arms crossed, was Carter. His usual arrogance had sharpened into something nastier. Marcus met his gaze, expression unreadable. "Something you need, Mr. Reynolds?" Carter let out a mocking laugh, shaking his head. "Oh, so now you want to act like the big man." Marcus didn't respond. He let the silence stretch. Carter's smirk wavered, but he quickly covered it with a sneer. "You're a joke, you know that? A bunch of nobodies online think you're some hero, but we all know the truth. You're just another janitor who can't handle a little criticism." Marcus studied him for a moment. "Criticism?" His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. "Is that what you call hacking the building systems? Vandalizing my office? Filing a false complaint against me?" Carter scoffed. "Oh, come on. You really think anyone believes that? You're just playing the victim because you know you don't belong here." The crowd murmured, some in agreement, some shifting uncomfortably. Marcus exhaled slowly. Then, in a voice measured and steady, he asked, "Carter, tell me something. Do you know why this has escalated the way it has?" Carter frowned. "What? Why this isn't just some private disagreement anymore? Why people are talking about this across the country?" Carter rolled his eyes. "Because you made a spectacle out of nothing." Marcus shook his head. "No. It's because people recognize what's happening and they know it's bigger than just you and me." The crowd stilled. Marcus took a step closer, voice still even but firm. "You thought you could humiliate me. That if you pushed hard enough, I'd break. That I'd pack up and leave quietly." He paused, letting his words sink in. "But I didn't. And now you don't know what to do." Carter's face twitched, his fists clenched at his sides. Marcus held up a hand. "Let me give you some advice, Carter." His voice dropped slightly, measured but piercing. "You can throw a tantrum. You can whine about how unfair this is. But at the end of the day, the truth is out. And when the truth is out, people pay attention. Carter's smirk was completely gone now, and for the first time he looked afraid. The crowd murmured again, but this time the shift was clear. Some employees who had laughed at Marcus just a week ago now looked at Carter with something closer to disgust. Carter opened his mouth to say something. To throw one last insult, one last jab, but then he hesitated because he knew he had lost. Marcus gave him one last look. I suggest you start thinking about the future, Carter. Because this moment, it's not going away. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away. And this time, no one laughed. By Monday morning, the final nail was in the coffin. Westridge Corporate sent out a formal statement confirming that a disciplinary committee had been convened. They didn't name names, but everyone knew exactly who was under investigation: Carter Reynolds and his group. Marcus sat in his maintenance office, scrolling through emails. The messages had shifted, no longer just support from strangers, but employees, some he had never even spoken to, apologizing. Mr. Washington, I should have said something sooner. I'm sorry. I saw what they did to you. I didn't do anything, and now I regret it. I never realized how much power some executives think they have over support staff. Thank you for standing up for yourself. Marcus leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. He had won, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like proof of how many people had been watching silently, uncomfortably, afraid to take a side until it became too big to ignore. There would be meetings, hearings. Carter's father would probably pull every string possible to protect his son. But the damage had already been done. Carter Reynolds' name was tarnished and, more importantly, so was his power. That afternoon, Marcus walked into the executive floor for the first time in weeks. There was no tension, no whispering, just employees working, some giving him respectful nods. Sophia sat near the front desk, tablet open, ready? Even some of the executives who had once mocked him now stood quietly, their faces unreadable. Marcus cleared his throat. All right, he said. Let's get back to work. And this time, everyone listened. Respect isn't given, it's earned. But sometimes it's taken for granted. People abuse power because they think no one will ever push back. But when you stand your ground, when you refuse to be intimidated, something incredible happens. People wake up. So what would you have done in Marcus's place? Would you have fought back or walked away? Let me know in the comments, and if this story resonated with you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Your support helps us continue bringing powerful stories like this to light. See you next time.